Hey, welcome. This is Luminara Serdar with Autism Transformed, and I have been working with kids on the spectrum for 14 years, taking a deep dive, deep studies into why autism is occurring. And so today I wanted to talk about why does your child have autism? And when we understand why, we can start deconstructing some of those behaviors and symptoms and signs of autism, which means we can help a child to be a heck of a lot more functional, have better eye contact, less anxiety, really participate more in the world. So I really want to talk about why kids might have autism and why it's skyrocketed in the last, couple of decades. And really, if you know me at all, if you know my approach, you know that I look at the body as, doing a lot of biochemical reactions. We have 50 trillion cells, and they're all supposed to be coordinated and doing biochemical reactions, and they work together as systems, as organs, as tissues. And one of the most common things that I have found in my practice that I have studied and researched for over a decade is that kids with autism, adults with autism, anyone with autism, because autism is just a lumping of a bunch of different behaviors and neurological issues, anyone with autism has a very high load of toxicity in their body. And before you poo-poo that idea, let me just say that our cells produce toxins and waste every single day. So we have 50 trillion cells producing waste. If that is not taken care of in a really efficient way, then that waste builds up in the body, and then that alters the way our biochemistry works, the way our neurotransmitters work in the brain, and the way our brain cells connect. And so what do we see in autism? We see high anxiety, we see developmental delays, right? Speech development, it's way delayed if it develops at all. We see apraxia, which is how a child moves their body. We see dyslexia. We see a lot of delays, even in babies, like crawling and walking, maybe rolling over, depends on when we start seeing the signs of autism. Lack of interest in others, lack of eye contact, really high anxiety. These are things that have a neurological basis. They start in the brain because our brain's supposed to be working, our cells are supposed to be working, our cells are supposed to be connecting, and our brain's supposed to be developing. And when we see these developmental delays, something's impeding that development. So is ABA going to fix it? Is speech therapy going to fix it? That doesn't really get at the root of what's going on in autism. Yes, therapies can help, but we're working at a higher level where the brain is, there are key things in the brain that need to happen before the effects of ABA and speech can really be realized. So I want to talk at the really basic level, the root cause level, which is toxicity and toxicity in the brain, and that creates inflammation. So if you have a child with autism, or even ADHD or any sensory processing disorder or any kind of neurodevelopmental issue, that is an indication that there's inflammation in the brain. And body-wide inflammation, we hear a lot of talk about inflammation and how things like turmeric help with inflammation. But, the brain is kind of a special thing. When it's inflamed, it's not going to be functioning properly. And this is where you see the delays in the autism signs and symptoms. So that's connected to our gut, which is also probably inflamed. So inflamed brain typically means we have an inflamed gut because there's such a communication channel between the gut and the brain. It's really a two-way street. Yes, the brain gives the rest of the body signals, but the rest of the body gives the brain signals too. So we have a two-way street here. And one of the main things that is a two-way street is the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is we have 12 cranial nerves. That means 12 nerves that come directly from the brain. And the cranial nerve comes down here on the side of our neck and innervates our chest, our abdomen, and our pelvic organs. So if we have gut inflammation, there's signals being sent up from the vagus nerve to the brain, and then from the brain down through the vagus nerve. That's a whole other topic. I don't really want to get into that, but I just want to show that there is a connection between the gut and the brain. And why is that important? Because of what we eat. You guys, you can change your child's autism symptoms just by providing really healthy food. Now, I know our food industry, the advertising agencies, they all say, oh, this is natural, this is good for you, this has, no crap in it. It's not true. Almost anything processed, let me correct that. Almost anything processed is going to have bad fats and oils. What's our brain? It's like 60% fat. And if we have those bad fats that we're eating, it's going to make our brain work less better. It's not helpful for our brain. Good fats are helpful for our brain. So most processed foods have bad fats and oils. Think of all your chippy, snacky, granola, all the things that are processed. And many processed healthy foods like chicken nuggets or, all the pre-made meals you buy in the freezer section. A lot of them have artificial preservatives, which our body doesn't really know how to handle, actually. They're not natural. Artificial colors and flavors, again, chemicals that our body wasn't naturally made with. And we're like, body's like, hey, what do I do with this stuff? And then adulterated proteins and fats and carbohydrates, things that our body doesn't really recognize. So food is the number one thing, really. And I know it's tricky and challenging, and, just to have really good food in your diet, but the best thing is to have whole foods, a whole apple instead of apple bars or apple flavoring in something, whole steak or ground beef, or whole chicken instead of processed chicken nuggets. So those are just some of the first tips. And really read the labels and get out all the artificial stuff. Like if there's something artificial colors or dyes or artificial flavor or artificial preservatives, there's a lot of those are linked to cancer. If you want to know more about that stuff, you can follow the Food Babe online. It's Vanny Harry, and she talks all about this. So she's a great resource for what not to put in your body and what is all the junk in our kids' cereals. She's really trying to get things out of trying to get cereals banned, because in the US we use bad chemicals and in Europe they don't use them. So we know the food manufacturers can actually make better things. So food is the number one place to start. And if we have more healthy food, we have less inflammation in the gut. Now, does that solve everything? Absolutely not. But it's a start, and it's something you have control of every single day. What's really contributing to the brain inflammation is, I find our kids have a lot of chronic infections. And maybe your child's had ear infections or gets sick a lot. I have some clients where their kids are sick every 2 weeks, and then they just recover and then they get sick again. I have also healthy kids who don't get sick. And that can also be a sign of immune system suppression, meaning the immune system just isn't strong enough to go after infection. So everyone's a little bit different. And we have to look at each individual child. But everyone across the board can eat really healthy, wholesome foods. Cutting out gluten has been huge, and cutting out dairy has been huge. So those are a couple of things I recommend for everyone. You may need to cut out soy, corn, eggs. It depends on what your child's reacting to. So there's also food sensitivities and reactions in the body. And that's part of that inflammation in the gut and then inflammation in the brain. Now, I know, I just want to give a little bit of background. I went to Purdue University, and my major was genetics and cell biology. So I geek out on the biochemistry. I worked in the biotech industry for almost 20 years with the Human Genome Sequencing Project. And I can tell you from what we learned from the Human Genome Sequencing Project and what we learned about genetics in the body and what I've studied for decades is that genetics is not the cause of autism. I know people will say genetics is the cause of autism, and genetics does have a role to play. But a great resource, if you guys want to get down in the nitty-gritty, is Ben Lynch's book, Dr. Ben Lynch, Dirty Genes. So maybe you've had some genetic tests done for your child, and what Ben Lynch talks about in that book is how our environment makes the genes dirty. I mean, this is a simplified way of putting it, but what we put into our bodies can affect our genetics. And so if your kids have an MTHFR mutation, or if they have a COMP-T, or, if you've done the genetics test, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, don't worry. There are certain genetic mutations that genetic companies or practitioners will look for in our kids. And if you have the MTHFR mutation, that means that you don't detoxify as well. So this is a common thing I find across the whole population of autism kids I've worked with, is that one, they're loaded with toxins, and two, they don't detoxify well. So imagine if you keep bringing things into your house, your food, your toilet paper, your whatever, and your kids and their crafts and everything, and you throw things in the garbage, but the garbage never gets taken out of your house. You don't have anyone to take the garbage out. Imagine what your house would look like. It would be pretty full of trash. And this is a metaphor for what's going on in our kids' bodies. Yes, we keep bringing things in, but we're not taking out the trash very well. We're not processing cellular waste from infections, and the waste from the foods, things that are in water, things from our environment, things we breathe in, that the body is like, I'm so overwhelmed and overloaded. My detox systems are it's like the factory is overloaded and can't produce anymore. So that waste just accumulates in the body. And a lot of toxins like heavy metals, if our kids are exposed to aluminum and mercury, and I find arsenic is a pretty high one. Some kids have uranium. Some kids I find have a lot of tin. It really depends on where you live, where as a parent you grew up and what you were exposed to, because we give that to our kids in utero. So these heavy metals, they love the fatty tissues. And our body loves to put them in the fatty tissues. And what's our brain? 60% fat. So we put heavy metals in the brain. We put heavy metals in the fat cells. We store them deep in the body if we can't get rid of them. So some of your kids might have high mercury levels. Some might have high aluminum. These all contribute to autism. These all contribute to the inflammatory state. Again, I'm going to repeat it. Our kids are highly toxic, and their detoxification systems are not working well enough to keep the load down. And so what I find we need to do is the first thing is to assess. Some kids have mercury, some kids have aluminum, some kids have high levels of glyphosate, which is a herbicide. Some people have high levels of industrial chemicals. I find a lot of kids with high levels of mold. So it depends on what's in your child's body and how the body's dealing with that. And these can affect the genetics. This is where the dirty genes come in. These things can sit on the genes and make them not work properly. And then we think, I have a genetic problem. I have a mutation. I'll tell you, I was just at a recent conference and I talked to, I can't remember the name of the company because I talked to so many, but it was a company who had a supplement, and I believe it was a peptide supplement. And they said they actually did genetic testing on their clients or patients before they did their protocol with the peptides, and then 6 months after, and they found the genetics changed, the mutations changed. I have always believed we can change our genetics. And so so why? Because every time we create a new cell in our body, our cells go through a genetic duplication, right? We're making a cell, so we have new DNA inside the new cell. And there's always a chance for mistakes, and there's always a chance for repair. We have innate repair mechanisms for our DNA and for our genes. So that's super hopeful. Our body already knows how to repair the genes. We just need to give it the right environment to do that. That's why I say it's not genetics, guys. It is just not. Because we can repair our genes and we can shift our genes, and people are starting to prove it. And I love that they're coming out with this information. So again, toxicity, and poor detox and inflammation of the gut and inflammation of the brain. And once we know what's going on in an individual child, we can take steps to help that. So what do we do if someone's overloaded with mercury? Well, first of all, we need to make sure, or mercury or glyphosate or a particular infection. A lot of our kids have Clostridia in their gut or different microbes that create a microbiome imbalance and inflammation. And what we want to do is balance that. How do we do that? The number one way we help our kids is to make sure that they start flushing out the toxic waste that is affecting the brain and affecting the gut. It's a process. It sounds really simple. Yeah, let's just get rid of toxins. But when I work people through a protocol and I see that they're eliminating toxins, I see better eye contact, I see speech developing or new words coming out, I see that kids have better skills, their coordination is on, their anxiety is so reduced. They're actually more sweet and pleasant and interactive with the family. They have more energy. I had a child one time who he would come home from school and just go into his room and just need so much downtime. He would fall asleep at school, actually. He had such little energy. And when I started him just on a 1 month protocol, just to get his elimination going, he would go on walks with the family and walk and not be in the stroller. He would come out after school and he would actually interact with the family. He had more energy and he was pooping every day. This is one thing. A lot of our kids have constipation, and constipation means they're not pooping every day, or they have I talked to so many people, they have little rabbit pellet poops, or they have chunky, lumpy poops, and that's a sign of constipation. Maybe your child's not drinking enough water. Maybe there's a microbiome imbalance that's creating constipation. Some of our microbes create ammonia, which stops our colon from actually eliminating. So one of the first things I do is I get kids eliminating. If your child's pooping every day, awesome. They should be pooping 1 to 4 times a day. And if they're not, that means waste is not leaving the body. I see some kids with frequent urination or bedwetting. It's usually a sign of mold, or that the liver is overwhelmed and they're not eliminating through the colon and they are eliminating through the kidneys instead. That's what a frequent urination is usually a sign of. Kids with rashes or really dark circles under their eyes, eczema, that means there's a problem with the liver being able to detoxify and that they need a little help there. So one of the key things is to look at our drainage organs. So colon is number 1, right? Our kids need to be pooping every day and they need to be eliminating those toxins. If poop sits in the colon for a really long time, those toxins will go ahead and get reabsorbed in the body and even go to the brain. So I see when kids are constipated, they get more angry, more stimmy, more anxious. And so when we have our kids pooping, we don't see that, or we see that less. We see that reduce. So elimination. So the colon is just the first way of elimination. We need to support the colon and the kidneys, but then the liver needs support. So if you take your right hand and put it right where your ribs end on your right side, the liver's right there, the liver and gallbladder. And that's usually, that could be swollen in kids if it's, it could have some inflammation there. The gut could be inflamed. So we need to work on reducing the inflammation, eliminating, and when we reduce inflammation, elimination starts to work better. And we need to work with the liver. This is a huge detoxification organ and often overwhelmed in the people I see. And then also our lymphatics needs to be flowing. So what's our lymph? If you picture back into high school when you saw the circulatory system in the body, how our blood vessels run throughout the body, our lymph vessels run right next to it. And the lymph actually carries toxins from the cells, all that cellular waste, and it puts it into the liver to be detoxified. And a lot of times our lymph is congested. So if your child's ever had like swollen lymph nodes, that's pretty common. That means there's a lymphatic drainage problem or a current infection, but usually the lymph's not flowing. And we can't get the lymph flowing unless we actually get the lower organs working better. And we can get the lymph flowing, but then if we get the lymph flowing before we get the liver working, the liver's going to be doubly, triply taxed and overwhelmed, and so we're not going to have a good flow out of toxins. So we want to start from the bottom up with clearing the colon and making sure that's working, clearing the liver, making sure that's working, and then going to the lymph and make sure that's working. And guess what's the last thing to detoxify? What's the top? The brain. We all want our kids' brains to work better, and it's really the last thing to start draining and detoxifying, because if we go after the stuff in the brain and our lymph isn't open, we're probably just the toxins are gonna change address in the body and move around. So we don't want that. We actually want things to flow smoothly. So over toxified, detox system's not working, lots of inflammation in the brain and gut. And that means our kids are not moving toxins through, and we see the neurological symptoms. Okay, someone asked, can parasites cause autism? I don't think parasites cause autism. I think parasites are part of the problem, and that's part of the gut milieu, part of the gut environment. And we do address parasites because everyone has them. Parasites are like a big black garbage bag, the big hefty garbage bag in the gut that hold toxins. It can hold mold, pesticides, herbicides, other microbes, yeast, Lyme. Lyme can be a big important thing in autism, and any Lyme symptoms can look like autism. So if you're, and it can be anywhere in the world, but I know East Coast and Connecticut area where it first started is pretty common, but really anywhere in the world, because by now Lyme has spread everywhere. So Lyme is something you want to look at. Mold toxicity is something you want to look at. And I can't tell you how many times I hear from parents, oh, we don't have mold in our house. It's new. Our house is only 2 years old. Well, the construction of houses nowadays are so airtight that any kind of moisture can really promote mold growth. And people have mold and they don't know it. Typically, if you go away from home and you feel better, maybe you're in the outdoors, you feel better, that's a sign that you have mold. If the whole family feels better, it's a sign you might have mold in your house. Other members of the family might have symptoms and they might not. I had a client once who their child I was working with had a lot of histamine reactions, so that means a lot of allergies, a lot of reactivity, very overloaded in the body, and lots of parasites too. And I said, are you sure you don't have mold? Are you sure you don't have mold? And about 6 months into working with them, they had rats in their attic, and they had someone out to take care of the rats, and the whole ceiling of the attic was covered in fungus. So you don't know until you check these things out. So parasites are a part of autism, I believe, and they can be a part of any chronic illness, actually. And there's lots of different kinds of parasites, you guys. And there's anti-parasitic medications, but I don't think any of them actually address all the stages of parasites. That would be the egg, the larva, and the adult. And we have herbs that we use that do address all those stages of parasites. And we can't kill everything at once, right? If your child has a chronic infection, has parasites, we cannot kill everything at once. Why? Because it's kind of like a nuclear explosion. Imagine the fallout. There's going to be so much toxic waste, and that can overwhelm the body and actually, it could be pretty deadly, actually. So we have to do it in stages, and we have to do it carefully. We have to make sure what I talked about, those drainage organs are open, the colon, the kidneys, the liver, the lymph, and we have to open those sequentially in the right order. And every child's going to be somewhat different. Every body is a little bit different because of our history, our genetics, our trauma, trauma and emotional stuff, that plays a piece too. I'm not even talking about that today, but it's definitely a part of it because that keeps things stuck in the body. Emotions have chemicals that represent the emotions in the body. So it's yes, we have an emotional thing, but we also have chemicals that represent that. So someone asked how to detox mold from the body. it's a careful process. Again, we have to have those drainage organs open, and there are different compounds that will bind up the mold toxins and get the mold out. And it's too complicated to go into here, but that's one of the things I do. I mean, we address mold in our protocol. Can mold cause ADD? I believe so, because mold is insidious. Like I said, it can cause frequent urination. It can mess up our detoxification organs. It can cause brain fog and brain issues. So ADD definitely can be related to mold, but ADD can be related to other things as well. It's a inflammation in the brain is likely underpinning it, and then we have to find out what is it that's causing that inflammation. Is it mold? Is it toxins from, some kind of bacteria? Is it toxins from some kind of parasite? Is it pesticides and herbicides? Is it some industrial chemical? Did mom or dad work in a factory, or did you live near a factory? Did you live near a coal-fired plant? Is it heavy metals? We do a thorough history to find out where your exposures were, because mom and dad's exposures are totally relevant to the child. Where mom and dad grew up, I have a child who was adopted from Russia and probably grew up near Chernobyl for the first 18 months of her life. And so, what does she have in her body, right? I've had kids where they have super high uranium levels. Again, it just depends on your exposures, where you grew up, where parents grew up. I had a mom who grew up in Iowa near the John Deere tractor factory, and they were always smelting iron and melting it. And she said every weekend, their white aluminum siding on the house was black, and her dad would spray it off. So if that whatever came through the air from that factory was on their house, what do you think she was breathing in every day of her childhood? So we have to consider these things. And, more and more I'm seeing that my generation, I was born in the 60s, my generation was somewhat toxic, and we're exposed to more toxins every day. So I have friends with ADD and, other kind of things going, but their children are starting to show lots of signs and symptoms. And I think it's not just where we grew up and what we had when we were born, but it's the continual exposures. So one of the things that I do every day is take binders, and that's like activated charcoal, chlorella. I have very specific ones that I use in my program that get out mold, they get out heavy metals, they get out viruses and pesticides and herbicides and industrial chemicals. So there's specific things that will grab these in the body and then take them out and make sure they leave. And I feel like since we're exposed every day in our food, air, and water, as clean as we try and be, we're still exposed. I think we need to live a detox lifestyle and have binders every single day, and eat as much whole, real food as possible and organic. It's been shown that people who switch to an organic diet already see benefits after, I think it's about 3 days. I also see this with gluten. Kids who go off gluten and dairy, the parents can see benefits within a few days. They mainly see the anger reduce, anxiety reduce. Everyone's going to be different, but a lot of gluten will have glyphosate on it, which is a nasty chemical that found in Roundup, and it does so many insidious things in the body, including disrupting our microbiome. So you see, it's all connected. What we eat, what we put in the body, what we breathe, what we drink, can create inflammation or not in the gut. That can create inflammation or not in the brain. But if your child already has autism, they've already got inflammation going on. So we need to address that. And I'm oversimplifying what we need to do. It is a process, and it takes easily a year or more. But what we do in that time is we modify our lifestyle to be more healthy, and it serves everyone in the family, actually. Let's see, I still don't see benefits, been gluten-free, dairy-free, organic for a year. What can people in this situation do if we are stuck? Well, Joanne, I'm glad you asked that question, because I'm not sure what the situation is. If you want to type into the chat, you haven't seen benefits. I don't know if that's for your child or for yourself, or what are the symptoms. But typically, this is awesome that you have a clean diet for a year. So if you're stuck in that, what I would do is delve in and find out, okay, what are the toxins the body's not letting go of? How are the detox systems working? You know, you have to dig in a little bit deeper. Diet is the first step for sure. But then I had a client on my protocol. His daughter's 21, and he started seeing changes after 2 days of being on the protocol. And he was like, really? Can I see changes after 2 days? And she was on a very clean diet her whole life, so she didn't have a lot of toxicity. It was kind of what she was born with and what set in early. She was the one that was adopted from Russia, and we don't know what was in there. Okay, Joanne says, child still facing speech delay, anxiety, also on methylation support for 6 months. So Joanne, I would say that's probably not all your child needs. I would say that he or she needs a little bit deeper dive, and probably needs to find out it sounds like you're working with a practitioner and you've done some really great stuff. I would look at what are the toxins inside, and there's toxin tests we can do. I typically do mold, heavy metals, and industrial toxins, and then I typically do a gut test, and that'll tell us the environment of the microbiome. And it could be, I would say if he's absolutely off gluten for a year, there's probably not any gluten or antibodies to gluten, but we don't know until we test. And then your child can be harboring some microbes that keep producing toxins, and you don't know it, and it's subclinical, meaning you don't see a sign that your child has an infection, but they can, and it's just going on internally. The other thing that can be happening is the vagus nerve. You might want to do some vagal nerve work, and a couple things you could do for that are gargling and humming. That helps to reset the vagus nerve. But if we're in a constant state of fight or flight, we're not going to be in the rest, digest, anabolic build mode of healing. We're never get in healing mode. You want to look at sleep. Is your child sleeping every night, or are they waking up? So disrupted sleep can be a huge hindrance to healing. So I don't know what else is going on, because all I know is what you wrote in the chat, but there are other things to look at. So we want to make sure our sleep is dialed in. We want to make sure our kids are not on screens a lot of the time. Getting out in nature is huge. It's great that you're eating whole organic food. Well, I don't know if it's whole food. Sleeping in the night, great. So, I would do a deep dive and ask a bunch of questions, and then probably do some diagnostic tests. And maybe you've done those already, and maybe they're not the right tests. A lot of practitioners do amazing work, but then you have to deep dive even more. So that's what I would recommend. Work with your practitioner to do some toxicity tests, some heavy metal tests. There are things you can do, and find out what is still left in there. Lots of food allergies as well. So food allergies, it tells me there's still leaky gut. You need some gut repair. You need some help. I don't know if your child's constipated. So, we take this as a case example. Thank you, Joanne, for speaking up. And you can be doing all the right things, and you still need a deeper dive. And this is where a skilled practitioner comes in. So if your child has lots of food allergies, that's usually a lot of times a sign of parasites, because they disrupt the immune system, a sign of leaky gut. And so you guys, you need some more gut work, and that needs to be dialed in by your practitioner. So I really appreciate your sharing that, Joanne. Thank you so much. And if you want to reach out, we could do some testing and things like that. But it sounds like you have a practitioner. I'm not sure. Anyway, I appreciate all you being here. Thank you so much. We're happy to help if you need testing, if you need, you want to delve more deeply into that drainage that I was talking about and detoxification, if you want testing for your child, to find out what's really going on. Thanks for the love, the hearts. And, we want to get at that brain and gut inflammation and help kids, because kids are our future. And your kids, I'm sure, have amazing qualities that they're waiting to share with you. And And I'd love to see that happen. So thanks everyone for being here. Take care. See you next week.